Boldwood presents Winter Nights at the Bay Bookshop, written by Jessica Redland and read by Lucy Brownhill and Luke R. Francis. I don't know what lies around the bend, but I'm going to believe that the best does. Anne of Green Gables, L.M. Montgomery. Chapter 1. Lily. So many people I knew claimed to hate Mondays, but I love them. There was something so exciting about starting a fresh week full of possibilities. Of course, it helps that I love my job as joint owner of Bay Books on Castle Street, in the popular North Yorkshire seaside town of Whitsborough Bay. I knew how lucky I was spending my days surrounded by books, my absolute number one passion, while working in partnership with my amazing dad, whose parents had established the bookshop. But today, my usual start of a fresh week positivity evaded me. I was awake half an hour before my alarm, feeling sad and listless. Sighing heavily, I reached for the well-thumbed copy of my favourite childhood book, L.M. Montgomery's Anne of Green Gables, which I kept by my bed. But even the wit and wisdom of Anne Shirley failed to lift me. I shuffled through to the kitchen to put the kettle on, hoping a strong coffee would jumpstart some positive vibes. Cassie, my best friend since senior school who worked part-time at Bay Books, had given me a set of 4 mugs with Anne of Green Gables quotes on them one Christmas. I looked at the one which seemed appropriate for today. If you can't be as cheerful as you can. I'd smile at our customers and exude positivity as we discussed books, and they'd never know what I was masking. Ready for work a little later, I cut my hands around my mug and stared at the calendar hanging on the wall, tears pricking my eyes. I'd done my best with the Tipp-Ex to obliterate the large red marker pen heart drawn around today's date, but I could still see the shape of it, still feel the heartbreak. Hearing the beep of Dad's car unlocking outside, I took one last gulp of coffee and left my mug in the sink to wash later. I lived in a cosy one-bedroom annex next to my parents' house, Everdeen. It wasn't where I'd expected to be at the age of 34, but sometimes life didn't go to plan. 6 years ago, I'd bought a 3-bedroom semi near Hernshaw Park with the first of my 2 long-term boyfriends, Ewan. We'd only been able to afford it because it was a wreck, and had spent 18 months gutting it and starting over. It was hard, exhausting, dirty work, but worth it to create the beautiful home for the family we both wanted. Except we never quite got to that part. We never even made it as far as moving in together. When the relationship ended, Mum and Dad offered to help me buy Ewan out, but living without him in the home we'd painstakingly refurbished together held no appeal. House sold, I remained in my childhood bedroom at Everdeen, but I found it a struggle. Even though I had a fantastic relationship with my parents, I'd been ready for my independence. When they suggested I move into the unused annex, it seemed like the perfect solution. Decorating the annex, which I affectionately named Green Gables, and making it feel homely was a welcome distraction for my broken heart, but it was only meant to be a temporary solution. Temporary had stretched into years, but I'd had a new plan to move out in the new year. A plan that fell through exactly 6 months ago. I glanced at the calendar again and shook my head, blinking back the tears. Cheers for that, Wes. Heartbreaker. Outside, Dad was placing his packed lunch and coat on the back seat of his car, which prompted me to grab my coat before I locked up. We were just over a week from the end of September, but the arrival of autumn had seen the temperature drop, so layers were needed for getting some fresh air at lunchtime. "Morning, Lily," Dad said as I joined him. "Morning," I replied with a brightness I didn't feel. I wondered if he'd register the date. He was usually good with things like that. We set off into town and I gazed out of the window at the grey sky peppered with dark rain clouds, reflecting my mood. "Are you all right?" Dad shot me a concerned glance as we stopped at some traffic lights on red. I shrugged. "Feeling a bit meh this morning." "Your mum and I thought you might be. Wes was due back today, wasn't he?" The light changed to green, taking Dad's attention back to the road, so he missed the tears pooling in my eyes. I attempted to discreetly wipe them away as I didn't want my parents worrying about me, and I certainly didn't want to cry over Wesley Sawyer again. I'd wasted far too many tears on him over the past 6 months, although it was perhaps inevitable that another wave of sadness would hit me today. After putting my life on hold for 2 years, while my second long-term boyfriend furthered his career in Dubai, today should have been the day Wes returned for good, meaning we could start searching for a home together and get engaged, as we discussed so often. Except he wasn't my boyfriend anymore. He wasn't coming back to the UK for another 4 years, if at all, and I was still living in my parents' annex with my hopes and dreams dashed for the second time by a man who promised me the world, but had chosen to conquer it on his own instead. I was determined not to fixate on it, but now that it's here, completely understandable, Dad said when I tailed off. We usually chatted all the way to the shop, but I didn't feel like a conversation this morning, and I loved how Dad recognised that and just let me be for the rest of the journey. We pulled into the private parking space out the back of Bay Books at 10 to 8. The shop didn't open until 9, but we always arrived at least an hour ahead of opening time to deal with any orders and queries which had come in overnight. "Any regrets about ending it with Wes?" Dad asked as he pulled on the handbrake. "No, it was the right thing for both of us. I'd never have moved to Dubai, and if he'd come back here, he'd never have settled and I'd have been permanently on edge, wondering when he'd leave. I'm just a bit fed up about how many years I've wasted, first with Ewan and then with Wes when I could have..." I broke off, shrugging. I'd been about to say, being with someone who loved me, but I wasn't sure that had actually been the issue for either of them. I think they had loved me, just not enough to choose me when push came to shove. Dad twisted in his seat to face me. "I liked Wes. I liked Ewan too. But I didn't think either of them were your Gilbert Blythe." Despite my melancholy, that drew a smile. Gilbert Blythe was Anne Shirley's perfect match, and also my ideal book boyfriend, although the pair of them didn't actually get together until the 3rd book in the series, Anne of the Island. Dad kept his eyes fixed on mine. "And deep down, I don't think you did either. But you'll find him eventually. Probably when you least expect to, and, of course, the unexpected things in life are often the best," I said at the same time as him, laughing together that we'd both thought of Mum's favourite saying. "I hope so, Dad." "I know so. It's how it happens in our family." He gave my hand a gentle squeeze, and I knew he was referring to how he and Mum got together. "Ready to face the day?" "I am now. Thank you." Dad unlocked the back door and deactivated the alarm while I flicked on the lights. My spirits couldn't help but lift as the children's section lit up, revealing the colourful spines on the paperbacks, beautiful illustrations on the picture books, and adorable bookish soft toys. I loved this shop so much and experienced such a sense of belonging every time I walked through the doors and breathed in the smell of books. This was my world, and had been for as long as I could remember. It was hard to believe that Wes could have thought even for a minute that I'd be willing to walk away from it to move to Dubai with him. I realised that, in isolation, that made me sound selfish, but the reality of our relationship was that he'd known that I never wanted to leave Whitspur Bay, and he'd been fine with that because he'd felt exactly the same way. At first. A wide archway took me through to the front of the shop, where we kept the commercial fiction titles and showcased new releases and bestsellers on sturdy wooden tables and display stands. It was also home to a range of beautiful stationery products and book-related merchandise. We kept the classics and poetry on level 1 and the non-fiction titles on the upper levels. Customers often likened the shop to Doctor Who's TARDIS, as it didn't look very big from the outside, but step inside and it went back a long way, as well as up all of those levels, giving us the space to stock a fabulous range of titles and making us the leading book retailer in town. I dumped my handbag on the counter and switched on the computer which connected the till, ordering and stock control system. "Would a treat from the chocolate pot take the edge off?" Dad asked. "I think it might. A hot chocolate and maybe one of Tara's brownies for 11s. The chocolate pot was a gorgeous cafe 3 doors along from us. It had opened just over 20 years ago and was one of the longer-running businesses on the cobbled street, although Bay Books was by far the oldest, celebrating a whopping 40 years next summer. The chocolate pot's owner, Tara, made the most incredible brownies, with the perfect balance of gooey loveliness inside and a slight crunch on the edges. Actually, all the food she made was divine, but the brownies were my personal favourites. The cafe didn't open for the takeaway trade until 8:30, but as Tara was in the kitchen baking way before that, she didn't mind the Castle Street traders messaging her with an order. It was such a lovely, supportive community, and I was proud to call many of the traders my good friends. "I'll take the bags and coats downstairs while you message Tara," I said. Dad passed me his belongings and I headed down to the lower ground level, home to our staff room, a kitchenette, staff toilets and a storeroom. Cassie and I were on a mission to keep Dad on the ground floor as much as possible. He'd been really struggling with his knees and any day now was expecting confirmation of a date for a double knee replacement operation. He didn't like us making a fuss, but there was no point him suffering unnecessarily with the stairs, especially when there were so many of them. Bay Books was a 5-story building with a unique layout inside. My grandparents had taken on a builder who'd restructured the upper 3 floors to create 6 levels. The smaller rooms gave the bookshop a cosier feel, as well as making it easier to categorise books by genre or subject. All those stairs provided a daily workout, but we didn't need to carry new stock to the upper floors or bring drinks up the stairs, thanks to the genius move by my grandparents of installing a dumbwaiter behind the till. They'd affectionately called it Jeeves, after Bertie Wooster's valet in the P.G. Wodehouse books, an invaluable member of staff. After his knee operation, Dad would need a fair amount of time off to recover, so we'd agreed to advertise a fixed-term contract for a 4-month period, allowing for a week's handover and some leeway at the end. The job description and advert were ready to go as soon as the date came through. Dad thought we should also advertise for a part-timer to give some flexibility, but I was adamant I'd be fine working 7 days a week instead of my usual 5. It wasn't like I had a boyfriend who'd feel pushed out if I upped my hours, and, in all honesty, the distraction would be welcome. "Tara says we can pick up the order in 5 minutes, Dad said when I returned upstairs. He was busy working through the overnight orders, so it made sense for me to go. I stepped out onto the cobbles, locked the door behind me, and breathed in the freshness of the morning. In my opinion, Castle Street was the best street in Whitsborough Bay. All the shops and cafes were independently owned and beautifully maintained. The cobbles and Victorian lampposts gave a quaint, oldie-worldy feel, which made for an inviting shopping experience, especially at Christmas. Immediately next door to Bay Books was Castle Jewellery, but I averted my gaze. The last thing I needed to see this morning was a selection of sparkling engagement rings, taunting me that my own engagement wouldn't be happening. Conveniently positioned next to the jewellers, and also far from ideal today, was the wedding emporium owned by my friend Ginny. I'd have avoided looking at that window too, but Ginny was standing outside with her hands on her hips, frowning at the display, so I could hardly dash past ignoring her. "Morning," I said. "You look puzzled." "Something's wrong and I can't for the life of me work out what it is." I stood beside her for a moment, studying the autumnal window display, and smiled as I spotted the problem. "Your bridesmaid's arms are on back to front." Ginny clapped her hand to her forehead, laughing. "How on earth did I not see that? Cheers, Lily." "Pleasure. It's a stunning display." "Thank you. I like creating my spring and summer displays, but there's something about the autumn and winter ones that excites me so much more." "I'll leave you to fix your bridesmaid's broken arms," I said. "Hot chocolates to collect." "I might have to get one for myself before I open. I have a feeling it's going to be one of those days where sugar's the only thing that gets me through." "You and me both." In the chocolate pot, I requested an extra hot chocolate for Ginny and called in at the wedding emporium on my way back. "Oh, Lily, that's so kind of you," Ginny said, smiling gratefully. "Thank you." "Got one of your favourites too," I said, handing her a bag containing a millionaire's shortbread. "11s." "You angel, but I don't think it'll last that long. Is there such a thing as half-8s?" Outside, I paused by the window to check out the bridesmaid mannequin. who was looking much better with her arms now attached the right way round. Ginny had created a stunning autumnal display with garlands of red, orange and brown leaves draped round the window and loose leaves on the plinth alongside flameless candles. The bride's dress was ivory, with long lace sleeves. The bridesmaid's was burnt orange, and a child-sized mannequin displayed an ivory dress with an orange sash and cape. Although Wes had wanted to wait until he returned from Dubai before we got engaged, we talked about our wedding on several occasions and had agreed that autumn would be best, sandwiched between the bookshop's peak times of back to school and October half-term, but well ahead of Christmas, our busiest time of the year. The bridal gown in Ginny's window was beautiful, but not for me. I wanted something with less lace and a fuller skirt when I married Wes. I closed my eyes for a moment, ejecting that thought. I wasn't marrying Wes. That ship had sailed twice, and I was through with men, at least for the foreseeable future. I trusted Ewan and Wes, and they'd both broken my heart. I couldn't face that happening again. And even if I was feeling brave enough to date again, there wasn't time. With Dad out of action soon and Christmas approaching, I had more than enough to keep me occupied at the bookshop. That was my focus for now, and exactly the way I liked it. But Dad's words from earlier crept into my mind. I liked Wes. I liked Ewan too. But I didn't think either of them were your Gilbert Blythe. And, deep down, I don't think you did either. Was he right about that?
Chapter 2. Lars. I opened the front door on Monday morning, expecting to see Mick or one of his colleagues from the removals company outside. But instead, it was a courier. "Signed delivery for Lars Jóhannsson," he said. "That's me." The squiggle I made with my finger on his handheld device bore little resemblance to my real signature, but it didn't matter. It was the signatures on the documents in the thick cardboard envelope he passed to me that counted. I thanked him and closed the door, ripping the tab from the envelope and pulling out the sheaf of papers. I'd already checked my banking app this morning, so I knew that the final payment had come through, but it somehow hadn't felt real. It was just a bunch of numbers, albeit a lot of them, and I hoped that the signed paperwork would help it sink in. When I was at school, I hadn't a clue what I wanted to do with my life. I excelled in all my subjects and didn't have any particular favourites, so that didn't help me with career choices. Narrowing down the subjects for sixth form was a massive challenge. I'd received A stars across the board for my GCSEs, and had wanted to do 4 A-levels rather than the standard 3, but they wouldn't let me. So I chose an eclectic mix of business studies, geography and German, and enrolled for an A-level in English literature online. It was the latter which unexpectedly led me to my career. The distance learning provider was the market leader at the time, but if they were the best, the bar was clearly set very low. The system was clunky to navigate, the materials were uninspiring, and the tutor support limited. "I could set up something a million times better than this," I'd lamented to Nana one evening, closing the system down in disgust after 3 failed attempts to upload an assignment. "Then why don't you?" she'd asked, a twinkle in her eye. So I did. I'd always been a computer geek and had developed several websites, so developing a reliable, user-friendly online learning platform couldn't be that difficult. My business studies A-level had also got me interested in entrepreneurship, and I quite liked the idea of working for myself. I was so proud of my study hub. The business had started small, offering distance learning GCSEs only before expanding to include A-levels, professional qualifications and tuition in the creative arts. The student experience was at the heart of what we did, with simple, intuitive navigation and learning materials available in a range of formats and layouts to cater for all needs, from visual impairments to dyslexia to neurodivergence. Last year, my study hub won its latest of many awards, and after the ceremony, I was approached by Calvin Warboys, CEO of the UK's biggest online learning provider, who, at a subsequent meeting, offered to buy the business. I genuinely hadn't considered selling, but his offer was too good to turn down, and with assurances that he'd keep my team on, I eventually agreed to his proposal. I'd spent the last 6 months gradually reducing my hours as I handed over my business, but now I faced a major problem. What the heck was I going to do with myself? I placed the paperwork on the stairs to take up to my office on the top floor later. I'd have a proper look through the contents, then file it away, bringing a close to the first chapter of my career. "Was that Mick?" Nana asked when I returned to the lounge. I shook my head. "Delivery for me. It's official. Got the money, got the paperwork, and I'm now unemployed." Nana laughed. "Unemployed? What are you like? I think this calls for a celebratory drink." "Nana, it's only 9 o'clock. I was thinking more along the lines of another cup of tea." "That I can cope with." In the kitchen, I rested my back against the worktop as the kettle boiled and stirred at the boxes piled up at one end. The sale of my business wasn't the only chapter coming to an end today. Nana was moving into Bayview Care Home, the leading facility in Whitsborough Bay for the elderly who either wanted to live independently but with help on site, or who needed some additional support with their health and mobility. I'd taken Nana out for a meal to celebrate the start of handing over my study hub when she startled me with the news. "I've been thinking about the future too, and while I've been blessed with good health so far," Nana had touched the leg of the wooden dining table, "that might not always be the case. I put my name down for a room at Bayview a while back and..." "What? Why didn't you say?" "Because they had a long waiting list, so it could have been years before I had the chance of a room," she responded. "However, they had their plans approved last year to expand into the hotel next door. The refurbishment's progressing and the show apartment's now ready for viewing. I've made an appointment for tomorrow and I'd love it if you'd come with me." "Of course, but..." I shook my head, struggling to take it in. "Are you sure about this? You love that house." Nana had lived in the same 3-storey, 4-bedroom terraced house just outside Whitsborough Bay town centre since marrying my grandpa Norman 63 years ago. Sadly, Grandpa had only lived to the age of 50, so I'd never met him, although I felt as though I knew him through Nana's stories of how happy they'd been together. When my parents separated and my dad, or Pabbi in Icelandic, returned to his native Iceland, they sold our family home and Mum and I moved in with Nana. I was 11 and I vividly remember Mum saying it would be temporary. 23 years later. "I do love my home, but I have to be practical about the future. Geraldine's already looked round and put a deposit down, and Hillary's got a viewing next week." Geraldine and Hillary were Nana's 2 closest friends and, like her, had been widows for many years. The 3 of them met up regularly and went on holiday together, and I'd been extremely grateful for that friendship because working weekends and evenings had been the norm for me, meaning I wasn't great company for Nana. "Oh, I get it now," I said, faking my indignation. "You'd rather live with your besties than me." "It's not like that, it's..." She broke off laughing. "Oh, you're teasing me." "Obviously. But can I make sure you're exploring this because it's what you really want, and not because you think you'd be a burden on me if your health or mobility did take a downturn? Because you could never be a burden." "You're a good lad, Lars, and I promise that's not the reason. I know you'd move heaven and earth to help me. I'm doing this because it feels like the right thing for me. However, I'm conscious that if I like the apartment and decide to move, you'll need to find somewhere new to live." "Why? I could buy you out." "You could, but I don't want you to. Even if it was your name on the deeds, you'd see it as my house and never your own, and I don't want that for you. Besides, selling that business of yours means you'll be able to afford somewhere in a nicer area, with a garden instead of a yard, and with off-street parking. Oh, imagine not having to drive around the block 3 times to try and find a parking space near the house." "Such a thing exists," I joked. Parking was a huge issue on Fountain Street, and the connecting roads, as a ridiculous number of our neighbours had large work vans and sometimes 2 or even 3 vehicles to a household vying for limited space. Nana had loved Bayview, as had I. So she chose an apartment, handed over a deposit, and put Fountain Street on the market. A few months later, Nana accepted an offer from the Clark family, and we were aiming for a completion date of late October so they could move in during the half-term holiday. I'd found a house too, or rather Nana had found it for me. The Lodge in Hutton Wicklow, a village 10 minutes drive southwest from Whitsborough Bay. It had needed a complete refurbishment and would hopefully be ready by the time the sale of Fountain Street went through. With so much upheaval at the same time, preparing my study hub for handover, helping Nana downsize her belongings and liaising with the builders at the lodge, it was no wonder I hadn't had any time to think about my next career move. But as soon as Nana was settled, I'd have plenty of time. And that scared me. What if I couldn't find anything that appealed? What if I found something, but having only ever worked for myself, I was deemed unemployable? What if it took months and months to find something? There'd be so much time on my own to think, and I shuddered at the prospect. I'd have to find something to keep my mind occupied quickly, even if that meant more volunteering. I already spent one day a week at Hutton Wicklow Library. Nana's friend Hilary was an avid library user and visited the main Whitsborough Bay one weekly. She'd spotted a poster on the notice board seeking additional volunteers for Hutton Wicklow, and I thought it would be a good way to get involved in the community before my move, while also indulging my passion for books. What I hadn't expected was that I'd become the tech guru. It was my fault. On my first shift, I'd offered to look at a system issue, and now I was the go-to man for anything technical, library-based and personal. Not that I minded. It came easy to me, so it was no bother to help others who struggled. But I had hoped to spend more time on the book side. Books were, after all, the reason why volunteering in the library had appealed. Perhaps I could increase my hours there. Anything to fill that dreaded thinking time. Chapter 3. Lars. "We're loaded up now," Mick the removals man told us a couple of hours later. "Ready when you are." I glanced at Nana, who was standing by the fireplace, gazing into the empty grate.
"Can you give us 5 minutes, Mick? Maybe 10.
"No worries, take your time. It's not like we've got far to go." Mick was Hilary's great-nephew. He'd moved Hilary into her apartment a fortnight ago, and Geraldine last week, so Nana was the last of the 3 friends to make the big move. "How are you feeling, Nana?" I asked. She turned round with a sigh.
It's hard to believe that I've lived here for 63 years. I sometimes can't remember what I had for breakfast, but I clearly remember the first night Norman and I spent here. We'd massively pushed ourselves to buy this place, so we had nothing left for furniture, not even second-hand. Everything was borrowed or donated. The electrics didn't work, and the only source of heating was this fire. My parents said we should wait until we could at least get the place wired properly before we moved in, but we were too excited. We spent that first night together eating cold baked beans out of a can, sitting on a pair of high wooden stools my aunt had liberated from a skip. And I was so happy at that moment that I thought I might burst.
Oh, that's a great memory.
One of thousands to cherish forever.
She breathed in deeply and gazed around the room before reaching for her coat, draped over the back of the nearby armchair.
But it's time for a fresh start. I'll text Geraldine and Hilary from the car and tell them to pop the kettle on.
While Nana settled into the front passenger seat, I wandered over to the removals van to tell Mick and his colleague that we were ready to leave. Moving Nana to Bayview wasn't a big job. She'd decided that most of her furniture wouldn't suit a modern apartment, so had splurged on several new items. Having her leave most of her furniture behind helped me when I was staying put for another month.
Hilary says she's baked a chocolate cake,
Nana said, looking up from her phone shortly after.
She knows how to make me happy.
Do you think the staff at Bayview are ready for you 3 getting up to mischief together?
It's Geraldine. She's the ringleader.
I can well believe it. Geraldine was a larger-than-life character with purple hair, a tattoo of Ursula, the sea witch from the animated version of Disney's The Little Mermaid on her arm, and the dirtiest laugh I'd ever heard. Half an hour later, Nana and I were in Hillary's apartment with Geraldine, while the removals men unloaded her belongings.
The three of us under one roof is going to be so much fun,
Geraldine declared, helping herself to a second slice of cake.
How's the refurbishment going, Lars?
Hillary asked. Really good. Most of the big things are done. Building work, rewiring, new heating and replastering. The kitchen's going in this week, and it's the bathrooms after that, so it should be mainly cosmetic work left when I move in. I crossed my fingers. Hopefully.
Have you decided what you're going to do with all your free time? Geraldine asked.
I shook my head. I still don't know.
You could retire,
Hillary said.
He's only 34, Nana protested. Far too young for that.
And I'd be so bored, I added. The refurb and Nana's move have kept me busy so far, but I'll need something for when my house is finished. I'm at the library again tomorrow, but 6 days off is far too much when I'm used to working 7 days a week.
But you're enjoying the library?
Hillary asked. I love it. Thanks again for the heads up. Nana received a call from Mick to tell her they were nearly finished and that a lorry had just pulled up with her new furniture. So we said goodbye to Geraldine and Hillary and returned to Nana's apartment. Within a couple of hours, everyone had gone. The delivery team had assembled Nana's new bed, positioned her other new items of furniture where she wanted them, and had taken all the packaging away. I'd helped unpack the boxes for her kitchen and removed a few heavier items from other boxes, but she was insistent on me not giving up any more of my day for her. I suspected it was more a case of her getting tired and also wanting some time on her own to adjust to the change. I was going to find it a big enough wrench to leave 17 Fountain Street, and I hadn't lived there for half the time she had, so her emotions had to be all over the place. I helped Nana make her bed with a new duvet set she'd treated herself to, and then I left her to it.
Don't forget to run the vacuum cleaner round before the clerks visit, she said as I hugged her goodbye. The new owners were coming round this evening to show their children their new home and measure up for curtains. I couldn't imagine they'd be bothered by the dust bunnies loitering in the spaces where boxes or furniture had been, but Nana had always been house proud and was keen for her former home to be presented properly. So, her wish was my command. As soon as I stepped into the hall back at home, the silence cloaked me, and I released a heavy sigh. Living here without Nana wouldn't have felt right, and I was glad she'd refused to sell it to me. In the lounge, Nana's floral perfume lingered in the air from where she'd spritzed her wrists shortly before we left this morning, and the colourful scatter cushions on her favourite armchair were still indented from where she'd been sitting. My gaze moved to the fireplace. Even though Nana had taken it with her, I could still hear the steady tick of her antique clock, a wedding gift from her grandparents. When would I stop hearing it? A lump formed in my throat when I shook my head. Oh, pull yourself together, she's not dead. No, thankfully she wasn't, but I still felt her absence keenly. I raked my fingers through my hair, shaking my head. I couldn't stand here all afternoon moping. Like Nana, I'd never been one for mess. She often said, clean house, tidy mind, which made complete sense to me. I don't think I could have set up and run a successful business if I'd had paperwork everywhere. On the middle floor, I paused on the landing, wondering which of the 2 bedrooms to tackle first, and going for Nana's. The sound of the vacuum cleaner's wheels across the wooden floorboards echoed around the room. One of the wardrobe doors had been left open, revealing a few empty hangers on the clothes rail. It felt strange being in Nana's room. She believed that a person's bedroom was a private space, so I'd spent very little time in there over the years, only going in to change light bulbs, to redecorate, and, most recently, to help her pack. I'd spent even less time in the other bedroom on this floor. My mum's room. Mum was in South America at the moment.
I wasn't sure of the exact country as she frequently changed her travel plans, and had learned that it was less stressful if I just pinned her down to a continent rather than trying to keep up with the specifics. After weeks of chasing, Nana and I had finally managed to get Mum on a video call a fortnight ago, where we'd updated her on our changing living arrangements. I'd expected her to be surprised, but she'd barely batted an eyelid. "What do you want us to do with your belongings?" I'd asked.
More stuff probably needs chucking, she replied, shrugging. Can you box it up and shove it in storage for me? I'll sort through it next time I'm in the UK. Any idea when that will be? Nana asked. Maybe October, Christmas, spring?
Accompanied by another shrug. Trying to get Mum to commit to dates was fruitless. Nana never said anything, but I knew it hurt her that her only child never seemed to want to spend time with her. Video calls were short, emails even shorter, and visits fleeting. Even if Mum was in the UK for several weeks, she only managed a few days at the most in Whitsborough Bay. Mum was a photographer, and I was in awe of her talent and extremely proud of everything she'd achieved in her career to date. But I struggled to comprehend how little her family seemed to mean to her. Nana wasn't the only one hurt by her limited contact. I could have understood it if there'd been some huge falling out, but there'd been nothing like that. Mum just didn't seem to think that physically being around us or even maintaining regular contact was important. Over the years, I'd repeatedly told myself that Mum's choices were about her and not me, but that did little to soothe the hurt or the feeling that, just like Pabby, she'd abandoned me. Turning the doorknob, I pushed open the door to Mum's bedroom. The afternoon sun shone through a gap in the voile panels on the window, creating a shaft of light in which dust motes danced. As I entered the room, I felt as though I was stepping back in time. It had been Mum's bedroom growing up, and when she married Pabby and moved out, she hadn't taken her childhood paraphernalia with her. When she moved back in after the separation, she said that, as the move was temporary, there was no point packing everything away. So she left it like a shrine to her childhood, and it still remained that way to this day. I didn't relish the task of packing up Mum's room. It felt intrusive, and I didn't know what I might find. It would have to be done, but perhaps not today when I was feeling emotional about Nana moving out. I'd finish the vacuuming, then head over to Hutton Wicklow to check on progress with my house. Far better to be surrounded by hammering and drilling than be alone here with my thoughts. Although there was something else I could do, something I'd woefully neglected across the summer. Smiling to myself, I headed up to my office to organise that instead.
Chapter 4. Lily. The paperback pixie's back! Cassie cried, waving her phone in my direction as soon as she arrived for her 10:30 till 2:30 shift the following day. Term-time lunchtime cover which fitted around the school run for her 2 young children, Hallie and Rocco. Really? Let me see. Cassie handed me her phone, and I read the post from first thing this morning on the Paperback Pixies Instagram feed. It's been a while. Have you missed me? I've missed sharing the book club with you all. I was needed on important pixie business, but I'm back now, and will be leaving extra books in and around Whitsborough Bay over the next couple of months to make up for the missed summer. As ever, if you find and keep one of my books, please share a photo and tag me in, #paperbackpixie, saying where you found it. Thank you, and happy reading. Important pixie business, I quoted. Loving that. Me too. Cassie joined me behind the counter as I scrolled through 5 photos showing books left at different locations around the town. I think you'll recognise all the locations this time, she said. The first photo showed a picture book about sailing boats placed on a bench beside the boating lake in Hernshaw Park, and the second location was the train station. E. Nesbitt's classic, The Railway Children, was perched on a stone ledge with a train just visible in the background. Are they all themed? I asked Cassie, surprised because the locations were usually random. They are this time. I scrolled through the final 3 photos, which were all commercial fiction novels. a crime novel featuring a murder at a lighthouse left by Whitsborough Bay's red and white striped lighthouse, a rom-com featuring dancing placed on the bandstand in the outdoor area of the Bay Pavilion, and a historical book set during World War II resting against the town's war memorial. "It's good to see the Pixie back," I said, "but it's still killing me that we have no idea who they are." The paperback Pixie had been leaving gifts of brand new books around Whitsborough Bay for 15 years, possibly longer. At first, they were somewhat of an urban legend, with rumours that there was a book benefactor in town. But with no social media set up, there was no photographic evidence. Across the summer, a year after I graduated from university, the Pixie left a book out every week, and our local newspaper, Bay News, picked up the story. The article included photos of a couple of the books and interviews with recent and previous finders, but no insight into who the paperback Pixie was. It stated that the journalist had never intended to identify them, because they personally believed that much of the charm came from the mystery behind it. Dad had laughed at that and said it was more likely the journalist had failed in their attempts to expose the Pixie and was trying to save face. After the news article, the paperback Pixie ramped up their activities, setting up on the socials and gifting books more frequently. There were occasionally non-fiction books, usually nature-related or local interest ones, but the majority were fiction, and I loved how they embraced all genres and all ages with their book choices. They were beautifully presented too, with a piece of colourful ribbon tied in a bow around the book, which was then placed in a clear plastic bag to avoid damage. One of our customers found a novel and brought it in to show us. Inside was a paperback Pixie branded bookmark and a postcard congratulating them on finding the book, hoping that reading it brought them happiness, escapism, adventures to new places, and a chance to meet new friends, along with a request to add a photo and tag the Pixie on the socials. "I better get myself sorted," Cassie said, taking her phone back and heading towards the stairs. "Cuppa?" "Oh, yes, please." "Where's your dad, by the way?" "With a customer in the children's section. Better make him one too." "Will do. I'll send them up in Jeeves." I checked behind me and pushed the button to send Jeeves down to the lower ground floor to wait for the drinks. A customer came down the stairs with a guidebook on the Cleveland Way, a 109-mile walking route which passed through Whitsborough Bay, telling me he completed the walk in his 20s, a few years after the trail opened, and was about to do it again now in his 70s. We had a lovely chat about some of his favourite parts, but I was dying to get back to the paperback Pixie's latest gifting. So, as soon as the customer left, I whipped out my phone. Scrolling through the latest photos once more, I wondered for the upteenth time who they were. Cassie believed it was a woman, Dad was convinced it was a man, and I thought it might be a group. We'd often wondered whether they were a customer of ours. They were clearly local, and we'd have loved them to buy local too. But we knew all our regulars well, and other than at Christmas time, when they might buy books for gifts, they typically had favourite authors and genres. I couldn't think of a single regular who'd bought even a selection of the eclectic mix of books the paperback Pixie had distributed. It was possible they ordered from our website, but if they did, the books were sent to different addresses, as we hadn't spotted any correlation between orders and the paperback Pixie's activities. Presumably, they ordered online elsewhere. Probably the site which must not be named, a joking literary reference to the world's biggest online retailer, which was a shame when we could have guaranteed absolute discretion and even offered a discount. The drinks arrived in Jeeves as Dad approached the counter with his customer, a pile of colourful picture books and a couple of accompanying cuddly toys. The woman looked to be about the same age as Dad, so I guess she was buying for grandchildren. I ran her purchases through the till and took payment while they continued their conversation about books they'd loved as children, and how enduring certain titles like Eric Carle's The Very Hungry Caterpillar, which had been first published in 1969, but was still a huge hit with kids today, as demonstrated by over 50 million worldwide sales. "Sounds like you've had a lovely conversation," I said to Dad after the customer left. "Her daughter's just adopted 3-year-old twins, so this is the first haul of bedtime reading. She wanted a mix of big names and new authors, so I've been in my element helping her choose." Although my dad was a big reader across most genres, His passion was children's books, particularly those for early years. His interest in how children learn to read had initially taken him into early years teaching, but he joined the family business after his mum, my Granny Blue, short for Bluebell, had shocked everyone by announcing that she'd secured a significant book deal with a major publisher. She'd never shared any desire to write a book, let alone that she'd actually put pen to paper and written several novels. Under the pseudonym of Josephine Forrest, she was now a multi-million copy seller of sagas set on the Yorkshire coast. We had a large section in the shop devoted to signed copies of her books, and always had a big turnout for each book launch. "I was beginning to think you'd be there all morning," I said, smiling at Dad. "Could easily have been. Have I missed anything?" I retrieved the drinks from Jeeves and filled Dad in on the reappearance of the paperback Pixie after their absent summer. "I'm so glad he hasn't stopped doing it." He laughed as I raised my eyebrows at him. "Or she, or they. Still no clues as to their identity?" "None. I don't think they're a customer, and I'm going to have to just live with that." "Time to take the poster down?" Dad nodded towards the large notice board attached to the storage cupboard beside Jeeves. It displayed useful information such as our opening times, book club details, and forthcoming author events. Pinned to it was an A5 poster posing the question, "Are you the paperback Pixie?" and urging them to get in touch, anonymously if they wished, to discuss working collaboratively. I removed the pins and took the slightly dog-eared poster down, shaking my head. "No, I'm going to do a new one instead. Bigger and brighter this time. If the paperback Pixie is a customer, they'll have no chance of missing it. And if they aren't, then we've lost nothing." Dad's phone beeped and he took it out of his trousers pocket, frowning as he studied something on the screen. "Everything all right?" I asked. "It's a date for my knee up. November 6th. "That's brilliant news." I checked the calendar by the till. 6 weeks on Thursday. I better get that job advertised and... I frowned at Dad. "I thought you'd be happy about it." "I am, but the timing's awful. I'm going to be out of action over Christmas. I can't leave you to..." "You can and you will," I said, cutting him short. "I can't bear seeing you in so much pain. Seriously, Dad, you have to accept that date." I fixed my gaze on his, eyebrows raised, until he smiled and nodded. "Okay, I'll do it. He has to get in that advert online, although I still think we should look for 2 people. "I can manage. I always do when you're on holiday." "For a fortnight. 4 months will be completely different." "But a chunk of that time will be after Christmas, and it's never busy then. I really will be fine." Logging onto the computer, I opened the poster advert I prepared for the notice board and window. I needed to add a closing date, but tutted as I studied the calendar again. The week before the week of Dad's operation was half term. We were always busier during the school holidays, and training somebody new felt more like being one person down rather than having somebody extra, because everything was so much slower. I showed Dad the calendar, and he agreed that his replacement would need to start the week before half term to get them trained before the schools broke up. That meant we had less than 4 weeks to find candidates, interview them, and hopefully offer somebody the job. It was tight, but we didn't have much choice. I added a closing date of a fortnight on Friday to the poster, printed off 2 copies and taped one to the inside of the window so anyone passing could see it. "Fingers crossed," I said to Dad as I pinned the second copy onto the notice board. "Please let there be a customer service-focused bookworm out there looking for a short-term contract." I glanced at the poster, chewing my lip, telling myself to stay positive. We'd find the right person for the shop. We'd manage to cover Dad's role between us, and, more importantly, Dad's operation would go really well, and he'd soon be pain-free. Chapter 5. Lily. While Dad was out for lunch, a flustered-looking man, probably in his early 20s, burst through the door and uttered a 2-word question. "Pregnancy books?" "Go up the stairs to level 5, and you'll find a selection to the right of the window. My colleague Cassie's up there, so give her a shout if you need any help or advice." He thanked me and took the staircase 2 steps at a time, returning shortly after with Your Panic-Free Pregnancy, the most popular pregnancy book we carried. "Great choice," I said, scanning it at the till. "It's really user-friendly." "Your colleague recommended it?" "I thought she would. She has 2 young children and she found it exceptionally helpful when she was expecting. There's another one in the series that guides parents through the first 5 years. Cassie swears by that one too." "I'll probably be back for that once the baby arrives. We haven't a clue what we're doing. Bit of a surprise pregnancy." His cheeks reddened as though he was embarrassed to have shared that with a stranger. "But a good surprise," he added, holding his phone against the terminal to make the payment. "The unexpected things in life are often the best," I said, handing him the book and his receipt. "All the best with the baby." I smiled to myself after he'd gone. Had I really just quoted my mum for the second time in the space of 2 days? I'd also been a surprise pregnancy. Mum had been 21 and just finishing her degree. She'd felt tired and nauseous throughout her finals, and had assumed it was from a combination of exam stress and late nights revising. Several days after her last exam, she wasn't feeling any better, so she went to the campus doctor, who asked her if she could be pregnant. The possibility had never entered her head, but as soon as the doctor posed the question, she knew the test was going to be positive. Her boyfriend, Justin, took the news really well, saying it's earlier than planned, but who likes plans anyway? They'd been together for 2 years at that point. Both had jobs lined up in Mum's home city of York for after the summer. Mum teaching A-level English literature, and had planned to get established in their careers before getting married and starting a family. It turned out that Justin did like to stick with plans after all, because he wasn't happy when Mum suggested cancelling their summer of interrailing around Europe. He couldn't see why pregnancy should be a problem, brushing aside Mum's concerns that lugging a heavy backpack around and sleeping on trains and in hostels might not be ideal in her condition. After several heated arguments, Justin finally came round to her point of view and agreed to change their plans. Mum assumed he'd book a relaxing beach holiday, but instead, he transferred her interrailing tickets into a friend's name. He claimed he needed to get the travel bug out of his system and assured Mum that he'd fully embrace being a father-to-be once he was back. She wasn't sure she believed him, but hoped he'd prove her wrong. He didn't. A summer of interrailing turned into a year of travelling. He let down his new employer by giving up his job, as well as letting down Mum and me by not being around, something which became a recurring pattern. Mum didn't think it was right or fair to only teach for a term and a half before going on maternity leave, so she withdrew from her job too, and felt terrible about it. Fortunately, her parents, my Granny Nora and Grandad Maurice, were incredibly supportive and agreed to look after me so Mum could start teaching the following September. There weren't any positions available for an English A-level teacher in York or the immediate area, but there was one in Whitesborough Bay. Granny Nora and Grandad Maurice had always planned to retire to the coast, so they brought that forward, allowing Mum to pursue the career she trained for and provide for me. Essential given that no financial support ever came from Justin. After settling in Whitesborough Bay, Mum became a regular visitor to Bay Books and soon befriended Marcus, bonding over their shared love of literature. They became good friends quickly, meeting up on Marcus's days off during the school holidays. When I was 2, they went Christmas shopping together, found themselves under some mistletoe and joked they'd better kiss. Neither of them had felt any romantic attraction until that point, but that one kiss unexpectedly changed everything. Within a year, they'd married and bought their first home together. Marcus was therefore my stepdad, but I'd always called him Dad, because that's what he was to me. The best dad I could ever have wished for. When I was 6, Cadence was born and Hendrix came along 4 years later, at which point we moved to Everdeen. One of the many things I loved about my dad was that he'd always treated the 3 of us equally. As far as he was concerned, I was as much his child as Cadence and Hendrix. Biology didn't matter. Cadence, now 28, was a paediatrician at York Teaching Hospital, living in a trendy apartment in central York with her surgeon husband, Corey. Hendrix was 24 and an air traffic controller at Leeds Bradford Airport. He lived in Leeds with his long-term girlfriend, Daisy, who was a brilliant chef. I was therefore the only one who'd stayed in Whitsborough Bay. Even though our jobs meant we didn't get to see each other as often as we'd like, Cadence, Hendricks and I had remained really close. As for Justin, he drifted in and out of my life and I stupidly let him. The last time I'd heard from him was 6 months ago, the day before the worst birthday ever. Wes had been due back from Dubai for a week's holiday, but as his parents, extended family and some friends were in Manchester, we'd agreed to spend the week there. Justin was working in Manchester at the time, so it seemed the perfect opportunity to celebrate my birthday with him for the first time ever, while also introducing him to Wes. Except my phone had buzzed with a WhatsApp notification before I left for my train on the Friday afternoon. From Justin. "Sorry, kiddo, double book tomorrow. Can't meet you now. In touch soon." I hated him calling me kiddo. It might have been cute once when I actually was a kid, but it wasn't anymore. I hadn't appreciated the short notice of the cancellation, but what really hurt was that he hadn't even acknowledged my birthday. It shouldn't have got to me because I'd never received a birthday gift from him, and the only occasions I'd ever received a card were if he happened to have a girlfriend at the time who took control of things like that. I clicked into that last message now and sighed. To be fair to him, the absence of a happy birthday message had hurt so much more this year because of Wes and I splitting up on my birthday. That had been nothing to do with Justin, and I'd perhaps been unfairly holding it against him, as I wouldn't normally have let 6 months pass without making contact. But as I stared at my phone, I realised I had nothing to say to him, so I closed WhatsApp down and put my phone away. "You look fed up," Cassie said, joining me at the till. I was just thinking about Justin. He hasn't been in touch since he cancelled on me in March, and I was wondering why I bothered trying with him. "Beats me. I know it's harder to cut someone out of your life when they're family, but when that person is never there for you, is it really such a big deal?" Cassie hadn't had anything to do with her biological father for years. He'd left when she was 8 and, just like Justin, had dipped in and out of her life. He only lived a few miles down the coast in Fellingthorpe, so it wasn't like he could use Justin's often-made excuse of living and working hours away. When Cassie found out that she and her partner Jared were expecting Hallie, now 6 years old, she wasn't sure she even wanted to tell her dad, but she decided to give him one more chance. His response to the news had been, "You needn't think I'm babysitting," which had told Cassie exactly what she meant to him, and she hadn't bothered with him since. "I know, but..." I tailed off, shrugging. "Sack him off," she said. "You'll feel so much better for it." I remembered Cassie telling me that it had felt like a weight was lifted knowing she never had to see her dad again, and how thrilled she was that she'd no longer have to feel that slap of rejection every time he cancelled on her. I hated the rejection from Justin too. It made me feel worthless, and I thought about cutting him out so many times. It wasn't as though he brought anything to my life, and I certainly didn't need him to fill any sort of gap for me. I already had 2 wonderful parents, and was blessed with 4 fantastic grandparents. Until recently, I'd had 6 wonderful grandparents because, despite their son's uninterest, Justin's parents had been eager to be part of my life. Sadly, they'd passed away within a few days of each other in February 2 years ago. The double funeral had been the last time I saw Justin, and had barely spoken to me then, despite plenty of opportunity at the wake to do so. I'd given him the benefit of the doubt because it was an emotional day, and also because Mum was with me, and she and Justin hadn't spoken in years, but he'd barely been in contact since. It was always me who did the reaching out, which I suppose spoke volumes. "Go on," Cassie urged. "Cut those ties." I screwed up my nose at her. "I want to, but I just can't do it." "Why?" "I wish I knew. My head's telling me the same as you, but there's something inside me telling me to keep trying with him." "Like a tapeworm?" Cassie quipped. "Look, Lily, nobody understands more than me because I've been there too. But you have to ask yourself if your life is better with him in it or out of it. In the 23 years we've been besties, I can't recall a single positive interaction you've had with that man, but I could reel off dozens of times when he's let you down or upset you. You deserve so much better, so have a word with that tapeworm inside of you. Ask it to explain why you're clinging on and deal with it. Promise? I promise. I smiled at her, forever grateful for her friendship. On to nicer subjects.